All things were now made ready in the city, and there was great concourse of people, for the tidings had gone out into all parts of Gondor, from Min Rimmon even to Pinath Galen and the far coasts of the sea, and all that could come to the city made haste to come. And the city was filled again with women and fair children that returned to their homes laden with flowers, and from Dol Amroth came the harpers that harped most skillfully in all the land. And there were players upon viols, and upon flutes, and upon horns of silver, and clear-voiced singers from the vales of Lebanon. Greetings friends, Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we will start a new series that talks specifically about the settlements and lands that a certain kingdom or faction has claimed in Tolkien's works. We will start the series off with Gondor and its many settlements in the late Second Age and Third Age. Let me know what other factions or kingdoms you would like to see me cover in this format in the comments below. I'll also go ahead and link relevant videos in the description and cards above. Thank you all for joining me today. Let's begin our tale. After the downfall of Númenor and the coming of the Men of the West into Middle-earth, the sister kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor were founded by High King Elendil and his sons Isildur and Anarion. While Arnor reigned in the north, Gondor took up much land in the south. Throughout Gondor's history from this point into the Fourth Age, the southern kingdom held and lost many regions. For instance, the lands of Enedwaith, Celanathon, which would become Rohan, Rovanion, and Umbar were all held by Gondor during points throughout the kingdom's history. But due to many victories and defeats in war for Gondor throughout the Third Age, many of these lands ultimately escaped the jurisdiction of the southern kingdom and were ruled by other folk. But after the return of the king, it is likely that places in Rovanion, Umbar, and beyond were overtaken or made neutral by the reunited kingdom. But certain regions, such as Anfalas, Belfalas, Anorion, and many others, were always under the jurisdiction of Gondor, and within these lands, some of the most renowned settlements of the southern kingdom of the Dunedain would be built. Let's discuss such places. Starting with the more well-known cities in Gondor, there is Minas Anor, the Tower of the Sun in Sindarin, which was built in 3320 of the Second Age, and it would later be renamed Minas Tirith, the Tower of the Guard. This city was originally founded by Anarion, and it would be the city of his heirs and the heirs of King Elisar, and it would also become the capital of Gondor after the population of Osgiliath was decimated by the Great Plague of 1636 of the Third Age. The Anor Stone would be a legacy of the city, and it would burn with Denethor. Afterwards, only those of incredible power and will could see anything but two burning hands within the stone. Minas Tirith would hold the White Trees of Gondor, and its seven-tiered levels, Tower of Icthelion, hollows, and other features would make this one of the most famous cities of Tolkien's Legendarium. Next, Osgiliath, the Citadel of the Stars, was built sometime after 3319 of the Second Age, upon and on either side of the River Anduin, and until the Great Plague of 1636 of the Third Age, Osgiliath was the capital of Gondor. It was first sacked during the Kinstrife in 1437 of the Third Age, and until the end of the Third Age, many skirmishes and battles would be fought for control of the city. The Osgiliath stone would fall into the Anduin during the Kinstrife, and it would be lost to the waters. The most well-known part of the city is the Dome of Stars, which had once held the Osgiliath stone. Osgiliath would be reclaimed by Gondor after the War of the Ring and rebuilt, but Minas Tirith would continue to be the capital of the kingdom. Minas Ithil, the Tower of the Moon, was built sometime after 3319 of the Second Age, and it was the city of Isildur until Sauron took the city in the early part of the War of the Last Alliance. It would be restored as a watchtower that would observe Mordor after the war, and eventually it would be taken by the Nazgul in 2002 of the Third Age. The Nazgul would give Sauron the Ithil Stone, and the Dark Lord would use this Palantíri throughout the rest of his days in Middle-earth. The city became Menas Morgul, the Tower of Sorcery, and it would be held by the enemy until after the downfall of Sauron, when it would be recaptured and restored by Gondor. While Minas Tirith, Osgiliath, and Minas Ithil are the three main settlements of Gondor, there were indeed many others that we hear about in the context of the Legendarium. Caer Andros, the Ship of Long Foam, was north of Osgiliath on the Anduin, and it was an island that was fortified by Gondor. This may have been originally fortified by King Menelkar in 1248 of the Third Age after his victory against the Easterlings. It was also garrisoned during the disaster of the Morannon in 1944 and in 2900 by Steward Turgon II. Aragorn would send fearful men who had marched with him towards the Blackgate to retake Caer Andros, instead of joining him in the battle that would likely cost them their lives. East and south of Caer Andros is Henneth Annwn, the Window of the West, or the Window on the West, which is a hidden outpost of the ranges of Ithilien. This was constructed in 2901 of the Third Age during the days of Steward Turin II, and it was put into a cave behind a waterfall that the water had originally carved. The waterfall poured into a pool of water that was revered by the Rangers. The concealed entrance to Henneth Annwn east of the waterfall made this a completely hidden refuge of men that played an important role during the battles with Sauron in the Third Age. Near the mouths of the Anduin River in South Gondor, Palantíri, the seaport, was a great city of the Dunedain. It meant Garth of the royal ships, and it was built in 2350 of the Second Age, as it was originally a haven of the faithful Númenóreans in Middle-earth, during the days of Númenor. It would become the main seaport of Gondor, and it would be home to the navy generals, and one of whom, Urnil, would be one of the last kings of Gondor. The people of the city did battle with the Corsairs of Umbar throughout much of the Third Age. It would even be taken by the Corsairs in 1634 and 3019 of the Third Age, but it would be quickly reclaimed by the forces of Gondor both times. Further west is Dol Amroth, which is translated to mean Hill of Amroth. Amroth was an elf that lost his love and life in the Bay of Belfalas, and the city would be named for him. Near this place would be the elven settlement of Ethelond. The city would be home to the princes of Dol Amroth and eventually the Swan Knights, a group of renowned and legendary horse riders. And according to the Unfinished Tales, Imrazor, a Gondorian prince of Belfalas, wedded Mithrelas, who had been a companion of Nimrodel, the love of Amroth. The two had a son, Galador, who was the first prince of Dol Amroth. This is interesting, for it would have been another union of elves and men in the Legendarium if it is canon. And during the War of the Ring, Prince Amrahil and his Swan Knights of Dol Amroth would play important roles during the Siege of Minas Tirith, the Battle of the Pelennor Fields, and the remaining part of the war. Other named cities of Gondor in the south and west regions are Calimbel, meaning Greenham, which was in Lamadan, Linhir, meaning river forts in Dor in Urnil, and Ethring, which was a bridge and possibly a settlement in the Ringlow Vale. Tarnost is also a possible city or location that is mentioned in some maps and notes of Tolkien, but this may have also just been another name for Ethring. The southernmost city or haven of Gondor was Umbar, which was also originally built by the Númenóreans in 2280 of the Second Age, and this is where King Ar-Pharazôn originally landed during his conflict with Sauron in 3261 of the Second Age. Juxtaposing Pelargir, this city fell from the grace of Gondor, and it became a port of the Corsairs and Black Númenóreans, those loyal to Sauron. And although kings such as Urnil I and Kiryondil would capture the city, it would be recaptured and held by the foes of Gondor throughout much of the Third Age, for the followers and heirs of the false king Castamir would flee here, after the civil war in Gondor. Under the name Thorongil, Aragorn would burn the ships of Umbar in the late Third Age, and after the downfall of Sauron, Umbar would be forced to submit to Gondor. Now that we have discussed the major towns and fortresses of Gondor, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other places that were built by Gondor, and either given away or taken during the Third Age. In and near the land of Mordor, Gondor established a few outposts that would be taken by Sauron's forces. The fortress that overlooked the pass of Cirith Ungol, where Frodo would be taken prisoner to be saved by Sam, the fortress that would become known as Durthang, meaning Dark Oppression in northwestern Mordor, and the Towers of Teeth upon either side of the Black Gate were some such places. All of these places were used to keep a watch on Mordor and stave off evil during the time that Sauron was dormant in Middle-earth. And these places would be taken by Sauron before and during the War of the Ring, only to probably be reclaimed by Gondor after the fall of the Dark Lord. Further north were the ancient and abandoned outposts of Amon-Hen, the Hill of Sight, and Amon-La, the Hill of Hearing, which were likely abandoned during conflicts with forces under the influence of the Dark Lord or from disuse. Near these hills were the Argonath, the statues of Isildur and Anarion which had been built by Gondor. In Kalanothon, the fortresses of the Hornburg and Agronost were originally strongholds of Gondor. These two places would play vital roles in the centuries leading up to and during the War of the Ring, as the Hornburg would become Helm's Deep, a fortress of the Rohirrim named for King Helm Hammerhand, which would have its own siege during the War of the Ring. Agronost, meaning Iron Fortress, would become known as Isengard, which would be inhabited by Dunlendings and eventually Saruman, before the Ents defeated him. The Orthanc Stone of Isengard would then be the property of the King of Gondor after the fall of Isengard, as it was in the days before the coming of Saruman. The Hornburg would remain the property of the Rohirrim after the War of the Ring and the Return of the King, and Aragorn would allow the Ents to return nature around the invincible Tower of Orthanc. Our last settlement that belonged to Gondor is Tharbad, or Road Crossing, which was one of the northernmost cities that was jointly shared between Gondor and Arnor during the earlier centuries of the kingdoms, and it crossed the river Gwathlo. Tharbad was likely established by the Númenóreans, and it survived on into the Third Age. But the Great Plague, floods following the Fellwinter, other events, and time itself led to the depopulation and desertion of Tharbad. It is likely that the reunited kingdom and expansion of the Rohirrim saw to the revitalization of Tharbad in the Fourth Age and beyond. And that brings us to the end of our discussion about the settlements of Gondor. From these different cities, fortresses, and outposts, we see the greatness and valor of the past, and how such things may be lost to time and decay. But through the efforts of people who stand united, such places and things may see the glory of old once again. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the beginning of this new series. If you did, please hit that like button and share this with a friend. What are your thoughts about Gondor? I think this kingdom's many settlements are telling of just how expansive and great a kingdom Gondor was in the Legendarium. Please let me know any thoughts, questions, corrections, and additions in the comments below, and please check out Tolkien Gateway and the Gondor Wikipedia pages in the description for many of the sources of today's video. Tolkien Gateway specifically was a great help in researching all of this, and that site also helps me a lot during the creation of many other videos as well, so please check that out. Also, please take a look at our music channel, Facebook, Twitter, merch, and Patreon. Links for those are in the description below. Our 12th podcast episode will be coming out soon on Patreon, so please consider looking into that. And I wanted to give a shout out to Inspyre Crafts and my friend David for making and sending me this incredible piece of art. A link to Inspyre Crafts' shop is also in the description, so please check that out and you won't be disappointed. Finally, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today, and I'll see you all again next week with a video on why the dwarves and elves dislike each other. As always, everyone, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one, my great friends.